Hello, National 5 music technologists. I hope you are doing well, keeping safe, and following government guidelines. I also hope you are excited and eager to return to school in August, undertaking your fifth year at Gleniffer High School. Now, what I've got for you today is an introduction to microphones and the options we have when we choose different microphones to record. So, more specifically, today we're going to learn about two different types of microphone. We're going to learn about four different types of polar pattern and understanding what a polar pattern is. We're going to learn about suitable distances for recording, and then we're going to complete an activity based on what you've learned today. So the reason I've decided to do this first is so you can understand when we get the chance to record the options that you have in picking the equipment. So for example, what microphone you're going to use, what polar pattern you're going to enable, and how you're going to set up the microphone. So generally speaking, when we talk about microphones, we talk about two different types of microphone, being the dynamic and the condenser. So what I'm going to do is show you some facts about each of them and contrast them, so you can understand more why we might use one rather than the other. So starting off, we're going to talk about our dynamic microphone. Now this is generally the microphone that you would think of in your head if I said what does a microphone look like, especially that second picture. Now we quite like using these in school for assemblies. The head teacher or one of the deputies might be given an assembly and they'll be using the dynamic microphone that we have in school. We also quite like using them because they are quite inexpensive. They're not too expensive compared to the other microphone we're going to learn about. They're used quite a lot in live performances. Now that's not saying that we don't use them to record, but generally speaking, you would find these microphones being used in a live performance. So if you are at a gig or a concert and there's a singer, they're generally going to be using one of these dynamic microphones. These microphones are also better for high volume recordings as they're much more robust. We might use this microphone for a bass drum or a bass guitar, something that's going to be loud. We also use these microphones because we don't need any additional power supply needed for it to work. Now obviously if we are using an amplifier and plugging this microphone into it, the amplifier needs the electricity and the power. But if we plug this microphone into the amplifier, then we don't have to put any additional power source through the microphone for it to work. It will just work with the power supply that's coming from the amplifier. Now to contrast that with our other type of microphone called our condenser microphone, you can see already by looking at the picture that it is a little different. Especially that first one is much more narrow. So this condenser microphone is more expensive. Now we do have a number of these in school as they are very good for recording and they are used more for recordings. Their job is for recording, whereas a dynamic one, we could use that at a live performance. You wouldn't really see someone using a condenser microphone during a live performance. As I said, they're used more for recordings. They also have very good sensitivity, so even if we're recording a very, very quiet sound, this condenser microphone will pick it up clearly. It's also very good in terms of the distance in which it can capture the sound. So for example, if I was in my classroom in the music department and someone was practicing the drums in the drum room down near Modern Languages, if I had the microphone set on high, then it would probably pick that up, even with the door closed, because it is so sensitive. Now this is what I was talking about in terms of power supply. For our condenser microphone, we do actually need this additional power supply that has to be put through the microphone before it will even work. It is 48 volts to be specific, but we just call it phantom power. So for our condenser microphone to actually even just work and turn on, we do need this additional power supply called phantom power. So just to summarize that then, so we've got our two different microphones, our dynamic and our condenser. Our dynamic microphone is used more in live performances, but it can record, whereas a condenser microphone is used for recordings. Our dynamic microphone is better for high volume recordings and things that are going to be louder, whereas a condenser microphone would be better for things that are going to be a little bit quieter, as it has very good sensitivity. Our dynamic microphone doesn't need any additional power supply to be put through it before it will work, whereas our condenser microphone needs this thing called phantom power put through it before it will even function. Okay, so moving on to our second learning intention, thinking about polar patterns. Now, a polar pattern is the direction in which the microphone will pick up the sound. And we have 4 of them that we have to know for National 5. So the first of which is a cardioid polar pattern. Now, if you look in the picture above the little emoji, you'll see that there's a purple shaded area. Now, you can see almost why this is called a cardioid polar pattern. And I think the reason for that is because it's shaped like a heart. That purple area is shaped like a heart. And basically what will happen, if you're using this cardioid polar pattern, then the microphone will only pick up the sound from the front of the microphone. And you can see that in the second picture next to that purple section. So, our cardioid microphone will pick up sound mainly from the front of it, and it's very good to use this in a studio or for live recordings. Another use for our cardioid microphone is to stop spillage and leakage from other sound sources. So say you are performing live and you're using your dynamic microphone to sing into. You don't want that microphone to pick up the drum kit or the electric guitar that's playing next to you. Whereas this cardioid polar pattern is only going to allow you to pick up the sound that's coming directly from the front of the microphone. So that'd be very good to use for a singer, for example. We'd also generally use cardioid polar patterns in the majority of the things that we're going to record in school, because we want to pick up the sound from the front of the microphone. Now, to contrast that with our next type of polar pattern, this is a hypercardioid polar pattern. Now you can see from the picture that we've now got this additional part at the back, which we didn't have before. So the microphone can now pick up some sounds from the front and from the back, but it still has that cardioid in its name, so it's still most sensitive at the front of the microphone and least sensitive at the back. Now, we're going to talk about close miking in a couple of minutes when we talk about distances, but this type of microphone is excellent for close miking, and it also is very useful. I'm not going into too much detail about maximum isolation, but this microphone will reduce the amount of leakage that you'll get from other instruments, like the cardioid polar pattern would do, but it also reduces things like feedback, which is that annoying high-pitched noise, and any background noise that you might have. So to contrast that with our just general cardioid polar pattern, the cardioid polar pattern only picks up from the front of the microphone, whereas our hypercardioid polar pattern now starts to pick up a little bit from the back as well. Our next polar pattern is going to be our omnidirectional polar pattern. This one's really easy to recognise, as it picks up the sound at 360 degrees all the way around the microphone, like in that picture up there. A possible recording for this might be for choral music in a church. Now, if you're recording in a church, you want to try and capture the fact that you're singing in a church. So using the omnidirectional polar pattern allows you to record the whole space rather than just right in front of the singer. This type of microphone produces a more natural, accurate sound than the cardioid because you're able to pick up some of the sound from the space that you're recording in. You might capture some of the natural reverb or sounds of the room, or the acoustic of the room if there's an echo, for example. So that one's pretty easy to understand, as the omnidirectional polar pattern captures all the way around 360 degrees around the microphone. And our last polar pattern is our figure of 8 polar pattern. Again, fairly easy to understand. Just think of the number 8 and you'll see how the microphone will pick up the sound using this polar pattern. So it's almost like you've separated it in half, and you will get a clear recording from either side of the microphone. This would be pretty useful if we were using something like or we're recording something like an interview with someone on one side of the microphone and someone on the other side of the microphone. So just to recap then, our polar patterns are the direction of sound in which the microphone will capture the audio, and we have 4 of them. So we've got the cardioid polar pattern, which is shaped like our heart and picks up the sound from the front of the microphone. We have our hypercardioid polar pattern, which again primarily picks up the sound from the front but a little bit at the back. We have our omnidirectional polar pattern, which captures all the way around the microphone 360 degrees, and then our last polar pattern is our figure of 8 polar pattern, which does exactly what it says. So like number 8, it picks up on equal sides of the microphone at front and back. So moving on to talk about distances. Now, when we are planning on recording, we have to select obviously which type of microphone we're going to use, and we also have to select which polar pattern we're going to use. But another main consideration is how far away you're going to place the microphone from the sound source. Now, descriptions of distances can be in centimetres, feet, or in metres, as they are generally accepted by the SQA in describing how far away you want the microphone to be from the sound source. So most of the time the distance of the microphone is common sense. Now, say you are recording a singer, then obviously you're not going to be saying that you want the microphone 6 foot away from the singer. Or if you're recording a violin, you don't want the microphone to be literally like 8 feet away. Or if you're recording a bass drum, you don't want it to be 1 centimetre away, because that would just be too close. So as I said, most of the time it is common sense. However, when recording a quieter instrument or a vocalist, it might be a good idea to use this thing called a close miking technique, which is between 0 centimetres to 30 centimetres away from the sound source. So you could say you want to record a vocalist using a close miking technique, and that would be an acceptable answer, because that's you saying that you know it's going to be between 0 and 30 centimetres away. Now, as I said, most of the time it is going to be common sense, and most of your guesses will be correct, and the SQ will hopefully accept a certain distance away. It's usually about 2 or 3 feet actually if it's going to be a louder instrument, but if it's going to be something like a vocalist, and they're looking for the close miking recording techniques or miking techniques. So what I'd like you to do for me is to have a wee look at this task. So for the following recordings, please detail which microphone type. So is it going to be condenser, or is it going to be dynamic? Which polar pattern, so your cardioid, hypercardioid, omnidirectional, or figure of 8, and the positioning, so the distance you would like to position the microphone from the sound source. So I want you to have a think. Now, don't worry if you get this wrong. This is literally the first time you have learned this information and you've had a look at it. The first time you've had a wee go at music technology. So having a think about the options you would have and you would use to record a solo acoustic guitar, a solo bass guitar that's been put through an amplifier, a male vocalist singing at a live concert, and a radio interview with host and guest. Now, I want you to pick the microphone you think would be best used to record that, the polar pattern you would like to use, and the positioning of the microphone from the sound source. So you have to take into consideration how loud the instrument's going to be, if it's live or if it's going to be amplified, or if it's just literally just the instrument. So lots to think about. But here's an example for you. So this is, if it said a solo violin, then this is the typical answer I would expect you to write. So I would record a violin using a condenser microphone with a cardioid polar pattern. I position the microphone around 30 centimetres in front of the violin. Now, I've also put that in front part just to give even more of a description of where you position it. As I said, most of the time it is going to be common sense, but you have to be quite descriptive for the SQA. They know you're not going to put the microphone 30 centimetres behind the violin or below the violin. but you have to put as much description as you can possibly put. So having a think, especially for that first one, for your solo acoustic guitar, whereabouts in the guitar would you put it, and position the microphone? Whereabouts would you put the angle the microphone or position the microphone through the amplifier? So quite a lot to think about. I'm interested to see what you think. If there's any questions at all, then please email me. My email will be on the PDF that I've attached. Or if you just have any concerns, then please don't hesitate to contact me. If you could submit these 4 questions for me on Show My Homework by next Friday, that would be amazing. So that would be, so today's it's the 28th that I'm recording this. So next Friday is going to be the 5th of June, if that's okay. I hope you've enjoyed today's lesson, and I look forward to hearing from you. And I will put up a new lesson for you next week. Stay safe. Thanks.